I've got Jonathan Davis, who's an economist and wealth advisor. And Jonathan, I know that quite often when we're talking about trading, we all sort of think, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. We don't have any trade with Iran. But I suppose, would there be stocks and shares that people might have in pensions which might involve this?
Sure, there will be a tiny amount of UK pension funds invested in Iran. But I'm quite sure if it's on the listed market, therefore it's publicly available, it's liquid, it's easy to sell. If it's what we call unlisted and private equity, in other words, it's not on the stock market, then yes, that will be problematic for those investors. Sure, that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, no, and what about the state of the economy in Iran? Do you know much about that?
Particularly because the oil price has been soaring over the last 2.5 years, the Iranian economy has picked up. It produces and sells, exports a lot of oil. Problematically, of course, for the economy, it's run by, this is my opinion, it's run by a fascist state. It's into state ownership of assets. It's very extremely cronyist. So, in that environment, outside of free markets, outside of capitalism, economies generally don't grow very well. But as I say, because of oil, the economy has been picking up recently.
Now, we do know that sanctions have different effects, don't they? Sometimes they don't work at all and they just make people dig their heels in. What do you suspect will happen here?
Oh, well, they can dig their heels in as much as they want, and I'm sure that they'll be bleating about the disgusting West, disgusting America. They'll be burning the US flag and so on. They'll be running to their friends in other parts of the world, not necessarily our best friends. As to whether or not they'll be able to make up the difference in the probable loss of business, probable loss of trade, I think it's unlikely. It will hurt. Of course, most problematically about this kind of thing, although, it's a means to an end, unfortunately, in the shorter term, the people who are hit hardest are the normal people. The elite always sail through this kind of thing. So, yes, it will be difficult for parts of the normal people, and that's always unfortunate, no question.
And if I can come back to you, Alan, that there have been street protests, haven't there, against price rises, about corruption and about the value of the currency, which has been going down.
Well, absolutely, and this has been an ongoing thing for the last few months. So often you're getting protests in a lot of Iranian cities, and not just one place, where it's not thousands and thousands of people coming out, but collectively, if they all get on the streets, you do see that. Where people are protesting, they're protesting the prices, they're protesting the collapse in economic growth, they're interestingly protesting the fact that the regime has used its bounty from the lifting of the sanctions a few years ago to waste money on foreign adventures, as they see it, rather than on fixing problems at home. And that has led into significant criticism of the regime as well. So yes, these are happening on the ground, and I suspect that as the economic situation worsens, there will be more and more people liable to join.
Yes, and Jonathan, how long do you think it's going to be before something properly gives in this?
I would suggest it probably comes down to egos and how brutal the regime is in putting down protests, which will get bigger as the people get hurt. The egos in Iran are as big as you'll find anywhere in the world, so they will be intransigent to the end of the earth, no question. However, if they have humanity inside of them, then they won't be firing bullets on the people. But yes, on the basis that the previous president let them get away with proverbial murder, perhaps actual murder in some cases, then of course that emboldened them to, your colleague there called it international adventures. I call it fueling international terrorism, which of course is what they've been doing, and that's what partly these sanctions are all about. Let's hope that they come to their senses and if they want to keep their country together, then they're going to just have to give in, stop fueling terrorism. As to whether that's going to happen within months or if it takes years, well, I think a lot of that is going to come down to how deep are their financial reserves, and specifically how long the price of oil continues to rise. Because that is, I imagine that's their largest income producer. And as it happens, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view.
Well, unfortunately, we shall never find out what the most important thing was, unless we can quickly get Jonathan back. But I think that's no. I've been told we definitely can't. That's Jonathan gone.
Oh, I thought I'm still here, no?
Oh, there we go. No. Yeah, what was the most important thing, Jonathan? Because we were all waiting, and then all of a sudden it sounded like you'd been taken out by a snowball. My goodness, wouldn't that be lovely in this weather? No, tell us what the most important thing is.
It must have been aliens. I can't, because I don't recall it. Oil is on a rising trend. It's their biggest income producer. It's going to keep the regime in place. Let's hope that they're not brutal and they start firing bullets at their people who are protesting because they're starving. Let's just hope it could last, because of the previous president basically getting away with proverbial or actual murder. Yeah. It could last a long time, and indeed it potentially could, because the oil appears to be on a rising trend. Okay. So they've got, unfortunately, an economic buffer, even given these sanctions. That's unfortunately the case.
Jonathan, thank you very much. That's Jonathan Davies, economist and wealth advisor.